All right, it's 5:31, so we'll call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order and start with the roll, please.
Ms. Pearson, Mr. Rollins, Ms. Mohammed.
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes, here.
Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
Ms. Stanford.
Here.
With 5 present, 2 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we go further, thank you, Connor Childers. He's working behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast on Channel 20. And I do want to remind everyone to hold your questions until the end of the presentations. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions to the meeting minutes of 9/7/21? Seeing none, I take a consensus to approve unless anybody objects. So done, thank you. Mr. Siegel, would you go ahead and start with the internal external stakeholder committee portion of the meeting?
I will, thank you. Good evening. I have some good news to deliver. The board calendar that we've discussed at the last committee of the whole meeting is now live. And yay. Thank you very much, the communications team. Y'all did a great job. The dates for some of the events have not yet been determined, but you can view the calendar on board docs as shown on the screen under events. And if you want to add an event to the calendar, please contact Laura Fromm. We are now going to hear presentations from Ms. Kathy Bayer and Ms. Maureen Kirschman regarding our revised governance structure and how we will present information in the internal external committee moving forward. Ms. Bayer?
It's red. Oh, now it's green. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kathy Bayer. I'm the Senior Communications Manager for Rockford Public Schools. I report to Mr. Earl Dotson Jr., sir. He is also here this evening to take notes and being my lovely assistant tonight. Now, let's take a look at Exhibit B. This committee is responsible for fashioning strategies and plans to promote nope, wrong presentation. Yep. Hey, Connor. That's right. We do need the image workshop. They look very similar. There we go. Thanks, Connor. It's all part of the warm-up act. Here we go. Okay, so the committee is responsible for numbers 1 and 2, ensuring that the desired image of RPS 205 is regularly updated. So this is not the first time you'll see me. And also overseeing the development and implementation of strategies for RPS 205 image building. Those are the highlights, right? So I'm here today to lead a short workshop on the district's image. Look at that 22-year-old kid. I moved to Rockford in 2008 to be a reporter at the Rockford Register-Star. I remember learning about Rockford Public Schools, and the education reporter at the time told me that Rockford Public Schools has a very checkered history, and everyone will tell you the same thing. Rockford Public Schools is terrible. But not my kid's school. My kid's school is great. We love our teachers, we love our principals, the staff is really wonderful, we have excellent after-school programs, there's so many opportunities for kids to get involved, but Rockford Public Schools as a whole, nah, you don't want to send your kid there. So that was my first introduction to Rockford Public Schools and its image. Now for a quick marketing plan, let's look at the difference between brand identity and brand image. Brand identity is the way that we want people to perceive Rockford Public Schools. It's what we put out there. It's the stuff and things that we create and push out to the community, our families, our parents, our stakeholders, all of that. It's our news, our images, our videos, everything that's branded with our logo, all good things, right? Brand image is the perception. That is the how we make things feel, or how we make people feel. Think of our customers as our staff, our students, our families, voters, and taxpayers. This is how they feel about Rockford Public Schools when they hear about it. So brand identity, again, it's what we're saying and doing. It's the stuff and things that we create. And then our image is how people feel about us. So what contributes to our image? It starts with an organization's history. We won't spend a lot of time here, it's kind of unpleasant. Rockford Public Schools has a history of constant superintendent turnover, crumbling buildings, annual staff cuts, especially for teachers every year, that really blasted staff morale. And all of that on top of inequitable funding and a desegregation lawsuit. That history contributes to the district's image and the public perception and feelings from our staff, students, families, and the community. Let's look at RPS 205 today. Much more pleasant. Within the past 10 years or so, under Dr. Jarrett's leadership, we've had a lot of positive outcomes for our students and our staff and families. Those things contribute to our image. Things like leadership stability, a facilities plan that invested in every single one of our buildings, a decreased tax rate, an increase in student involvement beyond the classroom. Again, all of those things help shape the perception, the thoughts and feelings about Rockford Public Schools. Now let's take a look at our brand identity. Again, the things that we push out. The communications team is made up of storytellers. It's our job to not only share the news and information that families, staff, and the community need to know and want to know, it's providing those stories, tangible things that you can hear and learn about, right? That's again what we're telling people about Rockford Public Schools versus how they're feeling. Now, the communications department has several tactics to share those stories and tell people about Rockford Public Schools. We use our website to bring people in with videos and photos from inside our schools and classrooms, and thank you again for approving our new website about a year ago. We work with local media to share stories and information about our students, staff, and schools. We use the 205 Vibe, let's make sure my pin is showing here, 205 Vibe, our multimedia platform to share firsthand accounts of what's happening in our schools and our classrooms, that sort of thing. We also advertise our stories on billboards, we run commercials on local news stations, and we've pushed out digital ads through Google and social media. We've also created several templates, so that way all of our materials look and feel the same with the correct logo, the same fonts, colors, that sort of thing. So there is that specific look and feel. It's why Ms. Kirchman's presentation will look very similar to this. Here's an example of a branded slide deck that our team put together for Roosevelt. We've been giving schools the autonomy to have their own brand, but we're making sure it still looks and feels like our stuff. It's still within that same family under the umbrella of fonts and things. Again, giving our schools autonomy to have their own individual look and feel, but still feel like Rockford Public Schools. And Roosevelt's Academy coach shared really, really nice feedback with Kate Specht, our marketing coordinator, and our team, that it's not only what he had asked about and hoped for, it's more comprehensive than he could have imagined. You have demonstrated to our team that they are valued. That is huge because we know that our teachers and families can be our biggest and loudest supporters or detractors, right? All of that contributes to the Rockford Public Schools image. And while the communications department work is all focused on the district's image, in reality, it's on all of us to maintain, promote, and improve our image. That includes our staff, students, families, volunteers, and school board members. Which brings me back to the task at hand. So let's have a conversation and consider Rockford Public Schools' image. As we continue our work, we'd like feedback from all of the board members about the district's image, both what you think it is now and what you would like it to be, what you think it should be. This feedback will help shape our work going forward. Again, I'm here to take notes and observe the conversation. So is my lovely assistant, Mr. Earl Dotson Jr. These are the three questions. First, what is your opinion about Rockford Public Schools and its image? Is your opinion different from what the community might think? What do you want the image of Rockford Public Schools to be? So I'll turn it back over to our committee chairman, Mr. Siegel, and we're happy to collect your feedback.
Thank you very much, Kathy. That was a great slide deck. This is going to be our opportunity to have a conversation about our image. And I'm going to, if nobody minds, start off, although I know it's probably appropriate for me to ask other people if they have comments. One of the things that strikes me in this slide deck is the persistent perception that Ms. Bayer experienced back in 2008, which was, yeah, Rockford Public Schools, except for my school, which is actually pretty great. We have something that we see every year that kind of backs that up. That's an internal document, and that is the teacher engagement survey, the staff engagement survey, where consistently we see that teachers feel great about their administration, about their coworkers, that staff feel good, yet they consistently report that how it's going in the other schools is pretty sketchy. And each year when we see this report, I ask, why does this happen? And I'm realizing that's the wrong question, because it's just easy enough to answer, because that's kind of the way big organizations and big systems work, that people will identify what's going well with them and report that, but then they hear what's going on and they'll report that it's just all bad. And the real question is, why do people trust other people to confirm their worst thoughts about other schools and not trust that if everyone is saying that their school is great, why can't they just accept that? So I guess my question is, can we actually fight that narrative in spite of the fact that apparently it's just a groupthink sort of thing that occurs in large institutions? We have a staff of storytellers. Can they not use their storytelling skills to change that narrative so that people can, instead of saying my school is great but their schools are not, to start saying our schools? And this is something that we can message to the community in a very meaningful way. On my block, if I go just a few houses to the north, I've got students over at Guilford. Go a few houses to the north or to the south, I got people over at east. They feel great about their schools, but they feel weird about the other schools. Somehow, we need to let people know that they're not just saying that that other school seems problematic, but they are, by extension, dismissing the thoughts and feelings of their neighbors, their friends, their relatives even, who have students at other schools. And it just seems like this is an opportunity for us to message that you think your school is great. Guess what? Your neighbor thinks so too, but it's a different school. Your cousin thinks their school's great. It's a different school. At the building level, we can tell teachers or staff in the buildings, you think your school is great. Guess what? Your coworkers in other buildings think their school is pretty great too. So I think a big part of building our image or our identity, our branding, has got to be somehow linked to changing this perception that my school is great, their school is bad. You asked 3 questions that I haven't actually addressed yet. What's my opinion of Rockford Public Schools? I happen to love Rockford Public Schools. I've had 3 kids go through Rockford Public Schools, and I assure you that there is no way that I could have educated these kids to anywhere near the effectiveness that they were educated by this system. I could not have provided them all those opportunities. I could not have put them in proximity to the fantastic people that they met. I am forever going to be grateful for what Rockford Public Schools it has done. And that is my image of Rockford Public Schools. And that extends to the people that I talk to who largely feel the same way about my school. My opinion is different from what the community might think, because I do hear people say, my school is great. And I trust them. I believe them. Because I believe that the schools my kids went to were all great. And so that's, the answer to question 3. What do I want the image of Rockford Public Schools to be? That these are our schools. And they are pretty great. Do we have issues that need to be addressed? Oh, we absolutely do. A lot of these issues are kind of specific to our circumstance right now, and I'm sure that those are going to be addressed in good order. Some of our issues are more persistent, but we're clearly working on those things, as we saw in slide 15. So those are my answers to those three questions, and I would just really love it if we could use the tools that we have, the collateral that we have, which is beautiful, by the way, to get this narrative of these schools are ours, and we have no reason to not love the other schools as much as we love our own. Would anybody else like to jump in?
So I think that I can agree to an extent of what you said in terms of the image being that people take pride in their schools and they're saying that it's better than others, because I definitely have seen that from the perspective of staff. But when it comes to the actual families and students, I actually hear the opposite of that. And I think that the public's perception in terms of our image of RPS 205 is actually negative. And there's so many different factors that go into that. I think that me being a parent, I've experienced some things firsthand that have been unfavorable. And just even from some of the youth that I've supported over the years, families that I've talked to, it's just a lot of confusion on what is actually going on the administration level, or just the resources that are available. I think we have tons of great opportunities, most definitely, and a lot of awesome programming. But for some reason, there's some disconnect in terms of how this information is being rolled out, and not trying to take away from the great efforts of the communication department, because there's definitely tools out there, the podcasts and social media, things like that. But it's still parents that are telling me that they don't know what's going on, and they have a desire to want to know. So I just think that my personal opinion in comparison to what the community thinks, I think are pretty much spot on. Like, I don't think that there's a far stretch, because I've experienced it and I'm hearing it, the negative things that people are experiencing. So I think that when it comes to what the image should be, it definitely needs to be more inclusive, and people need to feel that they truly are welcome and belong here at the district, regardless to what building they walk in, whether it be their school or an administration building. And we're definitely not there yet.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to add? Mr. Connor.
So in my opinion, that there's been a lot of progress made across a number of fronts. Being long time in the public schools, my family history goes back, long time here. And my dad was a teacher, and I have a lot of family that were in the education part. And so certainly we have experienced firsthand some of the ups and downs. And one comment I will say is that in my opinion, RPS has made some structural issue problems. In the 70s, they did away with sports and extracurriculars. They set up the conditions that had a lawsuit. And those events, I think, will go run deep in our community. And I think there's a lot of folks that are 30 years behind on all this. And there's a lot of local people, frankly, who, for their own reasons, are happy to push these narratives. So I'll just say that, you know, in my view, the amount of improvement that's been made, and I know our son went through the public schools, which is relatively recent. I have grandchildren here. And I would say that there's a lot of aspects that have greatly improved. My view is that probably academically, we have a mixed image. Some parts are clearly have done quite well. Some of the programs have done quite well. I think the fact that we have the programs that we've got on the career side, as well as college, has made a difference. I think there's a lot of people that recognize the fact, for example, that we have kids that are hired that are apprentices in the machining. We have a good relation with the trades. We've certainly increased both the number and the breadth of kids that go to college. Certainly local support for things like scholarships have increased. There's just, on all fronts, from my point of view, there are improvements being made. I already touched a little bit on the community, but what I'll say is that, particularly out where I am, there's a lot of people that go to private school. That's their choice, and they feel that the education is better. I mean, I can advocate all I want, but I mean, that's just the perception. And again, that goes back decades for the reasons that I talked about. I think that there's a recognition that, as slow as it might be, that things like the facilities improvements, the attempt to have the academies really broaden what we do, the fact that we've changed our emphasis a great deal, I think has made a huge difference from my point of view. It's probably not enough to get some folks to change their mind, quite honestly. And I think the other part that's huge in the community where I am is the fact that our percentage of taxes overall are quite high in the Rockford area. And Rockford Public Schools are, if I remember my numbers correctly, like 58-60% on average outside of the city in terms of percentage of the tax rate. And so, you know, that affects people out by me quite a bit. And really, I think taking that into account, I mean, there's a perception that it all costs too much. And especially in light of the progress. That's what I think a lot of the community is. Having said that, there is a lot of support out there. There are people who have come to the public schools in the last couple of years, especially given some of the things that we just mentioned. So I would say, you know, that has been a positive factor and reflects, you know, some piece of the community recognizing these differences. Then last is, what do I want it to be? I would say, number one, that it's a place where kids can go, feel valued, and it's an engaging experience. That primarily that the academics fit what that child needs. and that we support them through their process, whether it's going on to college or a career. And that that would be number one. Number two is that the methods that we use and the staff we have behind it are improved. I harp all the time on technology, and I think we are making strides there, but I think integrating that with our teaching methods makes a huge difference, especially in positioning us and the profiles of the children that are coming through our schools. And then third, I think we've started down a path of improving on so many different factors, on inclusion, on the fact that it's a broad, diverse community, and the challenges are difficult. Rockford has a lot of economic and social challenges that are reflected in the schools, and I don't think there's any way we can ignore that, although sometimes I think all of us try to ignore that. There are problems out there. And it's not all the Rockford Public Schools, if you will, fault, but it has been pointed out repeatedly that this is a total community effort. So I applaud us for going at that third factor, which is the most complex. So number one, the kinds of programs that we're doing. Number two is the fact that the methods and all that we have underneath it. And third is recognition that there are some tough issues, and we're trying to tackle them. To me, that will add up to an image that is good for the families and the children, and good for the community.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Rollins.
I'll start with number three. What do I want the image of the Rockford Public Schools to be? We say in our mission statement, I want the Rockford Public Schools to be the first choice for all families. If we're going to get there, then families have to feel like their kids are being educated and that they feel that we're taxing them fairly. My opinion on the Rockford Public Schools is that we're underperforming. That shouldn't come to a surprise to anybody. My opinion is not different than the opinion of the community. I've been an advocate of public schools for a long time, and I have a lot of conversations with people who send their kids to private schools, or who have moved out of the community, or who are telling me they're moving out of the community. We're one of the factors, one of the reasons they're moving out of the community. And when I advocate, I like to have data to support what I'm advocating for. And it's hard for me to advocate these days. Once upon a time, I thought that I could show that if you were going to move up into Rockton or Roscoe, that we could do just as good a job for your kids. I can't find that data now. So people, when we talk about the community, keep in mind, we're not just talking about people who send their kids to the Rockford Public Schools now. And one of the disconnects that we have that is something that you haven't talked about specifically, but people love their schools, but they don't look at the data. They don't really look at how those schools are performing or what the outcomes are. And we have schools in this school district that people love them. And I look at the outcomes and I just cringe, to be honest. But the people I'm talking to are people who look at that data. People who are looking to move to Rockford or the Rockford area are looking at that data. There are school district data aggregators out there that rate school districts. People make decisions based on that data. So I would, both for the schools and for the kids and for the community, I would love for the Rockford Public Schools to get to the point where we are legitimately the first choice for all families, not just the ones who live in Rockford, but the ones who are thinking about coming to Rockford and the ones who are thinking about moving out of Rockford. And I agree with Mike on the tax issue. You know, that's a perception that's 20 years old, and I think it's out of date. And I can argue with people until I'm blue in the face, but they think that our taxes are too high. Part of that is because we're the largest part of their tax bill. In surrounding districts, the school district actually takes a much larger percentage of their tax bill. Our rate is still higher than some surrounding districts. That's part of it. But when people talk about, and I work in a firm, we've got young people in the firm, most of them don't live in Rockford. The one that did live in Rockford moved after he had a baby. And when I asked him why, he was kind of sheepish about it, but he said, taxes, crime, and education. And we're 2 of the 3, and we have an effect on the 3rd.
Ms. McCulloch.
It's interesting. When I moved here in 1985, I mean, the school district was just all the rage. I mean, all good things to say. Had no problem moving into the district. And indeed, my children had a great education, which had my opinion of the district being still positive throughout the time my kids were in school. But it became apparent that other students weren't all having the same great experience that my children were, which was really what led me to be on the board, is I thought that I could have an impact on improving the outcomes for other students. That was 12 years ago, and that hasn't happened. And I can understand why previous board members who left the board felt like they spun their wheels. There was a long period, and some of it had to do with change of superintendents. We don't have that to blame it on. Some of it had to do with, issues with the union and where we could go with that. I think that we've come a long way, not that that has made a difference in the perception of the community. I think that when you talk about, one of the things that really struck me is, when you talk about the RPS 205 history, you use the word desegregation lawsuit, and I think that's such an inaccurate moniker. It wasn't a desegregation lawsuit. It was a discrimination lawsuit. It was because resources were different. It wasn't because we were forcibly desegregating students from other students. It was because the unequal resources. And so it is different. And so I think that we don't do our service by repeating that without or inaccurately. School board instability, we've had more stability than we've had in a long time, I think, and that hasn't, changed it. Inequitable funding, I think our funding, so the things from the past, as you say, are the past, and what is different today. I am stymied by how people can only view within their bubble, but that's what they know. And I think that it's just chatter that they listen to from other people about safety. I felt like we kind of were getting safer, and now I'm not feeling that we're at that place anymore. And so when I look for what my desired image is, RPS 205 schools are a safe place. I think that's just a priority for families. I would like to know that RPS 205 schools provide a great education, not just good, not just adequate, but a great education for students, whatever direction they choose to go in life, as Mike said. And RPS 205 prepares its children, its students, for a successful future and entry into the community, because the community is the students, not just while they're going to school, but especially for those who choose to stay or want to stay because it was a good place and they want to come back and raise their children here. Obviously, that doesn't happen or isn't happening like we'd see. The my school versus their school district is this is just such a hard place to overcome, because they really don't know what's going on in other buildings. And as Tim said, they don't even know what's going on in their buildings. It's like, gosh golly, I got into the Montessori program. It's like the best. You know, you'd have to pay a whole lot of money to go to the private Montessori program. But then you look at the scores of the students, how they're testing, and you wonder, why are parents so excited about it? Well, I'll tell you why. They think it's safer. Not that the education is that much better or that their children are learning that much better. I do love all the graphics, the continuity in your imaging. I would like to say, and I know Mike's here and communications are here, when I walked in the building today, the sign above that gives RPS 205 with the, you know, the hands up is kind of black. It's lost its color. So if we have an image, it would be nice to see our graphic displayed in something that hasn't, I don't know if it just turned with age or whatever, but it was something that I noticed. I also noticed, and I already told Mike this, that curb appeal is huge, and all those, the fall flowers and everything are wonderful, so thank you for that. First choice, and I never argue with people about where they send their children, because they're the parent, and they have to choose what's best for their children, even if they're doing it on limited information. But as Cameron said, we have a lot of parents, and we hear from them, who don't feel valued as parents or welcome as parents as part of their students' educations in the school. And so that is only something we can get by with the way our staff treats families, right? It's how they welcome them, it's how they integrate them into the whole tenor of the school, and how we treat parents when they come down here for whatever they need. And I also agree, and I applaud you, and Denise as well, have been really reaching out to the community to try to share resources. I agree, we have these resources. What is the best way that we can do that? We've talked about, with the early childhood centers, setting up different community presence within the school to kind of make it a one-stop. You know, COVID interfered with a lot of things, but there were some good ideas at the time for how to do that and make them accessible. And because everybody can't get on a bus to go somewhere, if we make it available right in their backyard, that is all the difference in them using. I think our extracurricular, there's so many different things you can focus on. I'm about the education, but as we were told early on in our board career is you know, sometimes what you need is a carrot. So some of our extracurriculars are, whether they're sports or whether they're, you know, fine arts or music or whatever it is, dance. I think we need to, I hate to use the word sell, but use that carrot, especially if it helps students to do better or to feel like I have to do well this week or I'm not going to be able to play, whether or not that is good. But that doesn't have, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for, you know, brand and image, and it's a time thing. I mean, we've got to do well over time. We have to continually get better, and we have to celebrate our gains. And if all we have is one school to celebrate that did really well on testing last year, that's a message in and of itself. So, and we as a board have to hold schools accountable for the educational component, because I don't think the boards in the past always did a good job of that. And so I'd like to thank board members who have really stepped up and pushed that and pushed the urgency of it. We all knew Jaime and his urgency, and it's true. If it's your student and it takes us 5 years to get better, well, that student's now gone on to that next level. I think one positive I have heard, one positive opinion from the community is the Rockford Promise program. I really have. I'm always a little bit surprised when people tell me they had just found out about it, you know, their kids in high school or this or that. So if there's a real understanding, not just at the high school level, but when kids are really young, of what's available as they move forward, I think that's a good sell as well. Because it's a great program, but it's not as well known as maybe it could be at different levels. So I think our technology, under Today one-to-one technology, and where we've gone with that is, was forced a little bit, not a lot bit, by the pandemic as coming sooner than later, but is a real important part of education because I think technology is. I don't know how well other private schools are doing but the impression of our technology being in place and with, you know, everybody has issues. I have issues. I just talked to Jason about issues. So it's not always perfect. You know, if we could just show that our kids are learning, that's the biggest thing, that they're learning to read, they're learning to write, they're learning their numerical skills. That would go a long way. And how do we get families to go out and spread that news is the $1 million question. So I know I talked a lot. Thanks.
Thank you, Jude. June.
I don't have a whole lot to add, just that my image of RPS has always been basically a positive one, from my own experience to my son's experience, continued experience. There are so many incredible students in our system doing incredible things every day that we don't celebrate enough. I think that those are the types of things that our community needs to hear more about. And the opportunities that we have for our students, Rockford Promise was what I was going to bring up. It is an incredible opportunity for families of any means to continue their students' education. So we have a lot of positives. And I guess I would just like to see those positive images emphasized more.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think we're going to, unless anyone else has anything else to add, we're going to move on to Ms. Kirschman's portion of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Hello.
There we go, now it's on. All right, never used that before. My name is Maureen Hirschman, and I am the Family and Community Engagement Supervisor, and I report to Mr. Earl Dotson Jr., sir. The Family and Community Engagement Department works to support our schools through the guidance and supervision of parent liaisons, coordinating district volunteers, and engaging with our community partners, including just about every organization that reaches out to the superintendent's office. And tonight I will be guiding us through this community relations workshop. As Ms. Bayer covered, we are here to look at the specific points in the governance document for the internal external stakeholder committee. For this section, we're going to look at points 7 and 8. The committee is responsible for fashioning strategies and plans to promote non-board volunteer involvement in Rockford Public Schools advisory bodies and monitoring non-board involvement, identifying opportunities for improvement, and ensuring that such opportunities are taken into consideration in the Rockford Public Schools planning process. Both points highlight non-board volunteer involvement. But what does this mean? What does it mean to be involved? To not leave this up for interpretation, we're just going to look at the definition. To be involved means to be actively participating in something, having a part in something, to be included in something. So how has our board been involved? With the facilities plan, board members were involved in subcommittee work and helped to roll out the external campaign for our facilities plan. With our student ambassadors, board members have attended student-led tours across our district to support our student ambassador program that started to help showcase the updates to our schools from the facilities plan, and board members have also attended our annual luncheon to show support to some of our youngest leaders. And Ready to Learn. Our board has supported the Ready to Learn project both financially and with time. Board members were involved during the planning sessions and were a part of our action committees. So what's our next steps? How do we help you, our board, get more involved with our schools and community partners to help reach our mutual goals? Here you will see a few potential involvement opportunities, and in the coming months through this committee, you will learn more about these partnerships and how you can get involved, but you don't have to wait. For Alignment Rockford, you can connect with me. Ready to Learn is one of the Family and Community Engagement's largest projects. For Rockford Promise, connect with Susan Fumo. I've heard Rockford Promise brought up a few times. This is something that you are all familiar with. It's a phenomenal partnership with RPS, RU, RVC, NIU, and the City of Rockford. And for other local community organizations, such as Eliminate Racism 815, you can connect with Dr. Tiffany Brunson. I also want to put in there that our schools are always looking for volunteers to help out with special events to promote family and community engagement. So after reviewing the committee's responsibilities outlined in Exhibit B, previous board involvement examples and potential opportunities, I would like some feedback on these 4 questions. Are these opportunities the right areas? What's missing? Why do you think that this is important? And how does the district benefit from this work? And I will turn it back over to the chairman of the committee, Mr. David Siegel.
Thank you, Ms. Kirschman. I took a lot of time starting off the last section. Would anybody like to kick this one off? Ms. Mohammed.
So looking at the slide that mentions the potential opportunities, I think that we can expand so much more on that. This is a good start, definitely, but there's so many more organizations that are missing from here. Just from a lot of the mentoring programs that have been established over the years, community centers. I mean, I just think that that's obvious that that's a missed opportunity, because these are areas where, again, we have a lot of family involvement and engagement, where trust levels are established. And that will be a good start, because that's one of the key things I feel that's missing right now, and why so many parents and students feel like they don't know what's going on. And I think that it will overall obviously benefit the district, because it will help our image. It will help us be seen in a more positive light. And yeah, I just think that just from my experience, just being on the board and just trying to reach out and collaborate on these different efforts, the ball has been dropped. We were able to do like a parent focus group, but then there was like no follow-up whatsoever after that. So I haven't been followed up with. Definitely the parents that were involved in that session have not been followed up with, and that's a problem. So those are areas that I can think of initially where we can definitely do much better.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mohammed. Appreciate that. Ms. McCulloch.
So the other community organizations is huge, especially the ones like United Way and some of the others where they bring, I know a lot of retirees, getting to that age group, but a lot of friends who come in once a week and just read with students, or Sunstrand employees who come over and do their thing. And I think actually that's one of the few places that then we get good feedback in the community, because then they go back to the community and at least those who have spoken to me, and they're not shy about being negative, have said how hard the teachers and the staff are working to support these students, how much of their heart and soul they're putting into it, and beyond education, also emotional, social emotional. So that is a great way to get the message out about the image we want to have about what's going on in the classrooms. Now, you have to coordinate that with outcomes as well, achievement. So I think that's probably, to me, just one of the largest, and I know Alignment Rockford has groups as well, but what was Front Porch?
That should have been off of the slides. And the updated presentation does not have Front Porch, but that is a volunteer opportunities with our athletic department and with our fine arts department.
Oh.
And we do work a lot with many of the other organizations that aren't listed. For us to list an expansive, all of the organizations on one slide wouldn't fit. The Rockford Reads program is phenomenal, and we're always looking for more volunteers for that as well.
So here's a chance for the community to see how many people are involved, because you could have had a second slide that said other community organizations, and it's too much to list, so put it on a separate slide. Let's see the whole, you know, the whole group of it. And I'm sorry, what did you say about Front Porch? You put it on there, arts and
It's volunteer opportunities with our athletic department and our fine arts department, such as the band grandparents program.
Okay. What else beyond the band grandparents? Because that's an awesome program.
That would be through Bonnie Sperling with the fine arts department.
No, I know exactly what it is. I've attended them when we were doing it.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
But what do we have for parents coming in to help with sports other than booster clubs? Because that's a school.
Sure, it's coaching opportunities and programs such as, I mean, I'll speak on a very personal level. My children are part of the robotics team, and so that's all parent run. Parents run the entire robotics team at their school, and so that would all be a part of, you know, that's part of the Front Porch program.
And I think parents' involvement doesn't get that same, I mean, you do it because your kid's there. Are you going to continue to do that when your child is not in that program, I guess? And I'm looking at people who are out there doing it for children who they don't know. And because they believe in the community and they believe in public education. So, I don't know. Somebody else.
Thank you, Ms. McCulloch. Mr. Connor.
I know we have a lot of this, but one of the things I'll say is, as incredible as these programs are, there's a lot of people when I talk to them that have never heard of any of this. And it's interesting, Ms. McCulloch mentioned people who are in retirement. I think that there's a lot of people that have background in all kinds of skills. And I know we've tried to reach out, and so I applaud us for going out. But, you know, one of the things that, and I know we're working on this, but I think mid and small business is probably one of the areas that we haven't connected, and that's where there's a lot of jobs. And I think that I was talking to somebody who owns a restaurant, and I said, did you know there's now a pathway, I think this was correct, for the retail side, including hospitality. And, you know, they were pretty much gobsmacked, if I can use an Australian term. And my point would more be that I think reaching out to business, and I like the chamber, and I'm glad that we're active with it, but I think even there, I think there's a lack of knowledge on all the things and the opportunities. And I know I've encouraged a lot of folks that own their own business. I said, they've said, well, why would students be interested in my business? And I said, well, they may or may not be interested in your business, but the fact that you put it all together and ran it, I think is something that's credibility, and that they're very much interested in that. So I think small business, mid-sized business is something we've really got to go out and personalize. And whether it's us as board members, but I think having some kind of consistent plan that year after year goes after this, I think would make a difference. The second thing is, and being a tech head, I suppose it's natural for me to suggest this, but you brought up the robotics programs, but I've been whining almost 8.5 years about the lack of development, as in coding and all that. And I know there's some, but there's a pretty fair amount of people involved in that, and IT to some extent. And I'd even push for things like statistics. I don't think people understand all the kinds of positions that are there, and that the skills, starting with the young students, what they can do. I think there's a lot of people that see only certain careers. I mean, what is it, graphic design, I think is still one of the #1 most picked positions, which blows my mind because that's the one that's pretty much overstocked. So my point is that I think there's a practical side to this, and I'm glad we reach out to all the organizations we do because there's a lot of help. But on the practical side, there are a lot of people with a lot of experience, and it's reaching out, you know, and I would still say, you know, at an elementary school level, if we had, you know, coding, and I know they have those little machines where you can code and they go in different positions and so forth, but I really feel that and especially I might say my plug for high school is being out and being a data guy. I am telling you right now, it would blow your mind what students are getting for starting salaries in any data-related field, especially things like data science, data scientists, statistics, and we don't do enough to reach out to that, and there's a lot of people with that background here. So I would say those are areas where I would definitely want to see us. That's really, from my point of view, numbers 1 and 2. And I think it's very important to do the social emotional side and all that. But I have to say, I think we could turn a lot of heads by some of the programs that I've described to them. You know, people need to know about that. There has to be large megaphone. I mean, if we have to buy a half an hour from the 3 networks on, you know, Sunday morning or whatever to show some of this, or get on some of these programs, you know, and show what's out there, and you know, focus on the students and all the things they're doing. I mean, I don't think we see that nearly enough. And the last about the benefit, I know I'm focusing on the practical stuff, but it just seems to me that, you know, one of the big things that I didn't say when we talked about the image was there's still an image of that the students that graduate from RPS don't necessarily get, you know, the best jobs and so forth. And I think that's absolutely not true. And I think that would be something, a direct benefit for the district, is to really pound on this year after year, is how many of those things and the academy and all those pathways. I would say we just can't push that enough. I mean, one of the things that always shocks people is when I tell them about the healthcare pathway and what we have for, you know, student experience and all that, and they're just really almost shocked. And it's not because, I mean, really communications is trying your best on this, but there's got to be some avenues that we're not following up, because I'm telling you, people just, by and large, don't know about it. So that would be my focus.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Ms. Stanford.
I basically have a question. Is there a resource available anywhere with a list of what the other community organizations are, what opportunities are available, where volunteers are needed, where board input is needed? Some of the things we've talked about tonight I've never heard of, and if I've never heard of it, I'm sure the community's never heard of it.
So Dr. Brunson would be a great point of contact for a lot of the work that she's doing currently with our community groups, such as Eliminate Racism 815. I can also help get connected to lots of community organizations. Our list is very expansive and does include our community centers, Northwest Community Center, Washington Park Community Center, the Boys and Girls Clubs, United Way, and many of the smaller organizations that are within our community. The volunteer organizations with them would lie with those organizations. Rockford Reads is through the Rotary Club. That is the reading program that exists for our students in second grade. And the Rotary Club is always looking for volunteers to come in and read with kids. It's a wonderful program. So if you are interested, I'm happy to send you that
So there is no
information.
resource where I could see a list?
On our district site, we have a couple of our larger programs, but that would be the best place to go. Otherwise, it really is dependent on what we hear in family and community engagement for schools that are reaching out to ask us to help them recruit volunteers for programs. Most of the schools recruit volunteers for like events at their school. They do it at the school level.
I would just say, Ms. Sanford, thank you very much. So that's a great suggestion, and that's something we can absolutely follow up on. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford. Ms. Pearson, I know you arrived a little late. Would you like to weigh in on this?
Not at this time.
Thank
There's
you.
death in my family, and that's why I'm.
I am so sorry. I'm going to be super quick because we're out of time. One of the early steps on my path to this place was reading in second grade with Mrs. David at Hillman School. That seemed like it was 1,000 years ago. But I'm thrilled to know that we are still coordinating volunteers to help our littles learn their literacy and numeracy. And I think it is important that we can continue messaging to our community that those opportunities do definitely exist. It's something that's fairly easy for the individual to do. I'm sure it's a lot of coordination as far as the schools go. So I know it's a heavy lift on this side, but it is something that I think is very much worth it for our kids. For the sake of time, I'm just going to wind this up. Thank you. This is a really great discussion. I appreciate everybody being involved with this. This would be the time where I would preview consent items over the next couple of meetings, but we have none, so I will not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Mr. Connor, if you would, can you lead the Performance and Monitoring Committee portion of the meeting?
Yep. All right, there's 2 items on tonight's agenda for the board's consideration. One is international travel for a group of camp students from Auburn, and the other is a facility. The other is a facilities report, and we've asked Dr. Heather Saltis to briefly comment on the capital request to attend the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh and a cultural visit to London, and then after that, Mr. Wilson Bailey will present the facilities update on behalf of the district. So, Dr. Saltis, welcome.
Hello, I'm Dr. Saltis. I'm Executive Director of Schools and Special Programs. I support the CAPA program at Weston Auburn, among other special programs, and I report to Mr. Gallagher. And I'm here just to answer any questions and prepare for next week's board meeting and discuss any questions you may have about the Auburn CAPA invitation to participate in the Fringe Festival this next summer in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Ms. Stanford, were you first? Oh, did I? Sorry, I'm at the green light problem here. I'm trying to see you all. So, Ms. Stanford, if you
I just basically have one question. I see the cost is pretty high. What are we doing for fundraising the kids fundraising for this? How are we not excluding kids that can't afford it? That's my main
Great questions. A couple of the questions that I had potentially anticipated were, first of all, 100% of the CAPA students were included in the invitation. There is a commitment on the student part to do a certain amount of work and rehearsal hours to prepare to perform in Edinburgh, so that it was kind of self-selected that way. But any student who wished to attend, they are fundraising to make sure that there is no issue with equity with students being able to attend financially. There's no cost to the district. Currently, there's a whole plan. It's through World Strides. They've done student travel for 50 years, and they have a very scheduled plan and suggestions for everything from corporate sponsors to the CAPA teachers working at concessions for all the sporting events on a volunteer basis to help raise funds. As a matter of fact, they have about 15 students potentially going, and they already have enough for 5 full scholarships at this point in the year, which could be distributed. They also have a confidential financial survey that students are filling out that only the financial tech, the administrator, and the 2 teachers involved in organizing the trip are able to assess, so they can distribute the money equitably for students who need the support, and they're committed to doing that throughout the year. It looks like the deadline to apply is at the end of October, so it looks like they've been having meetings since spring, and potentially they would have 20 or fewer students that would actually go put on the performance and experience the trip, and it's optional. But it is open to all of the students.
Mr. Owens?
I've got a question you probably can't answer. I don't remember ever approving anything like this before, being asked to approve something like this before. Is this like the first time we've done this in the 10 years I've been on the board?
I'm not sure if it's the first time we've done it or the first time we've chosen to approve it. I know I did inter-country travel when I was a CAPA student in the 80s, and I would love to get back to some of the amazing things we did back there to make it a world-class experience for our students. They get college credit if they choose to finish the project, brand recognition, they get experiences that are going to help them with their college applications, as well as, you know, if they're going straight into the professional world. So I don't know why you haven't had a trip like this before. I think it's really exciting. It happens all the time. Districts all over the country do it. So I guess someone else might be able to speak to that more than I, if there are trips happening and then they're just not board approved. I really don't know.
There have been trips, but they have been kind of independently organized with a third party and small groups of students. And so that it does come through for the district's liability insurance, but it does not require board approval. It's fully through a third party. This is the first request we've had in my time here since 2012, where we've actually asked for a group of students on a school-sponsored activity to have international travel.
Okay, so this is an official RPS activity.
Yes.
So if anything goes wrong.
Well, World Strides has a full, you know, they do student travel all the time. So there's a legal, all the legal I's are dotted and T's are crossed with our legal department prior to any approval.
Mr. Golick.
That doesn't mean that we're buying insurance with them because we're self-insured. It'll be under our insurance. Is that correct? The teachers who go, I would assume, is that paid for, underwritten by the fundraising or World Strides, or how are the teachers how are theirs being paid for?
I don't have the exact breakdown. I can get that for you next week. But typically, the way these trips run, X number of students, and then there's an adult that goes free. So there are currently 2 teachers, and I think 3 parents going. The parents pay for themselves, of course. And I can let you know what that breakdown is for the teachers next week.
Also, I see that when it was initially put forth in January and what you've put forth today, it said it's updated or changed or whatever. What is different? I didn't feel like reading through the 2 and seeing what you'd changed. So what is different between what we saw in January and now?
I was not part of the January submission, so I'm not 100% sure, other than I have gathered all the information that is before you tonight, and we'll add anything you have questions about for next week. So there may be some updated rate information. I think it predates anyone submitting it this evening. But I can look back at the board docs. Was it submitted as a board doc in February?
Mr. Vosberg's actually the one, or Dr. Vosberg's had the signature on it when I looked at the one in January. And that's the original documentation that was put through by the program to put this in place. So, and I did read this correctly when it said this was the updated one, right?
I believe the original one was just the educational, to my knowledge, the original, it was the request for educational tour approval without all the appendages and documents that you received, so I believe that was the update.
I believe that to be correct as well, but to reiterate what Heather had stated, we could work together to look back at what was shared with you prior and just simply bullet out the differences in terms of what has been updated.
Any other, Mr. Siegel?
Thank you. Can you talk about the academic component, credit component of this? Is it something that applies for high school credit, for college credit?
That's the exciting thing. It's college credit, obviously pending on the receiving universities, you know, what they'll accept, depending on what university is. We all know who parents in college, we have kids in college, what they'll accept. But they can receive college credit for a project that they do and then a paper that they write at the end, as well as the teachers who are going can receive college credit for work that they do as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Which is similar to like an early college experience. I don't know if any of you have students who've done a week or 2 week long early college experience, maybe after junior year, where they get an experience and to build their college application, and then they often are assigned 1 to 3 college credits for that. It's a similar type of opportunity.
Mr. Connor, can I ask another question? So you said it was offered to all Kappa students. The performance that they will be doing is dance or music? Or?
They chose a musical to have it open to the entire Kappa team, so there could be a dance student, someone who's in the pit band or orchestra, visual art, someone who might be working on the sets or acting.
And so how many students do we have that it was offered to?
The total number of Kappa students? Sure. I don't know. I'll get the exact number for you.
20 out of 100, 200, 300?
Several hundred. I don't know if it was offered to all the freshmen, but again, coming out of COVID, I think there are probably some of those concerns or questions that families have as well, but I can get more information about exactly what that
And I can understand that. You said all of them, and now you're saying maybe not the freshmen?
I don't know. That's a good question. The response I had from the teachers is it was offered to all Kappa students, and because there is an opportunity if you're in visual arts, dance, vocal or instrumental music, acting, or theater.
Any other questions or comments? Just a couple things from me. One is, I think this is great, and it's clearly, I'm going to say this out loud and throw stones if you like, but this is Kappa only students, so one of the things I'll say is that this would be a benefit of the Kappa program in this particular case. We're doing this to enhance the educational experience for our students on the fine arts side. The question does come in my mind, would we do this for other kinds of programs? And, if we had a bunch of engineering students who wanted to go to MIT, would we do the same or what have you? So, and I'm all for this, and being somebody who was heavily involved in the arts in high school, I'd say, yeah, kids would, flock to something like this. But I just want to make sure that other fields of endeavor are in this thought process. So one of the things that I'd like to, because I think your title is special programs or something like that, and I apologize, I can't remember exactly, but my point would be, to be on the lookout for other programs and the impact. And one of the things I would say is that as a district, I'm not really asking for a policy on this, but I think it would be good for us to know the criteria and why we picked this, and what would be the kinds of things that we would say yes to. A lot of fundraising involved with this, so I know there's a lot of skin in the game for the people that want to be involved. I would just say that, let's make sure that we wrapped our heads around kind of the larger picture on this. That would be the one thing I would ask. I'm not asking for you to come back with something as such, but just say this would be something I'd like you to consider. Oh, Ms. Stanford.
One more thing. As we get closer to time that they're going on the trip, I would love to see what they have prepared. If we could, attend a dress rehearsal.
Well, one of the
even see a
fundraisers
video.
is actually a preview, a couple preview sessions of the musical that they'll be taking to Edinburgh. So we'll make sure we invite the board members if
That
you'd
would
like
be
to come
great.
attend the preview and finish off any last fundraising for the trip.
Ms. Goldsmith, yep, I see you.
Yes, I wanted to offer to you that the board does have a policy on field trips. It's policy 6.240, and in that policy, it details that for international field trips, the factors that the board should be considering are the educational value, student safety, parent concerns, heightened security alerts, liability concerns, and equity concerns. So following up on one of the board members' comments with regard to equity, I would just advise and recommend that you well publicize that this opportunity could be at no cost to all the students. The low number of interested students indicates to me that maybe not all are aware that they can attend at no cost, and also that you offer assistance with regard to passport acquisition. Those kinds of things can seem overwhelming to some students who have never traveled internationally.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Bailey will present the facilities update.
Good evening. Mr. Connor said, I'm Wilson Bailey, Director of Facilities here at RPS, and I just wanted to come before you this evening and provide an update on facilities and some of the work we're doing. I'm given to understand you're very eager to hear about the facilities master plan and what's coming next. This coming December, a recap of the 10-year facilities master plan will be brought before you for discussion, and then in January, discussion will begin about or regarding the next facilities master plan. As you're also aware, the ESSER and ARP ESSER funds, that's our main priority currently as we're looking towards this summer and the projects to be accomplished. I have a list of schools that will be addressed this summer. East, Flynn, Lincoln, Washington, Bloom, Guilford, Lathrop, Spring Creek, Riverdale, and West. I imagine that you've seen those in writing and would be happy to provide them to you again, but we're currently working with our engineering partners and our owner's rep to make sure that we can meet the timelines to begin that work when it needs to happen. Beyond that, I just wanted to talk to you this evening about work order turnover, our decennial and annual life safety, and preventative maintenance. So if we're looking at our work order closure times, which has been a big item for us for the last several years, we can see here from fiscal year 18 to current, looking at the darkest line on the bottom, that's time to close of less than 5 days, to the most opaque line at the top, which is less than 30 days. You can see a consistent pattern of that closure time dropping over the summer months, which we attribute to summer projects because our work orders are open longer, they get closed less often. You can also see around April of fiscal year 20, a very low valley where COVID happened. And then we have generally been on a consistent climb since then.
I am so sorry to interrupt, but can you give an example of work orders? There are some new board members that may not, this did not occur to me when we reviewed. Sure. Yeah, if you could give a couple examples so people know what you're addressing.
So our buildings, for the trade staff that we employ internally, we track costs, we track hours of the work that they're doing, as well as many of the contractors that we employ to complete work that we don't either have the technical capability to complete or the resources to complete in-house. So that time and that money is tracked on those work orders. Beyond what we track in-house, the work order system, which is called it's a CMMS, Computerized Maintenance Management System. That's how our buildings communicate maintenance concerns or maintenance problems to us. So on an annual basis, one of our staff, our facilities coordinator, Cora Hayes, sits down with an OP at every school, the principal, if they want to and if they're available, to ensure that they understand how to submit those work requests to the facilities department. And some of the capabilities contained within that system allow us to provide updates to the requesters as the work order progresses through its phases. Like I said, we use this not only for the buildings to communicate their work to us, but for us to track that information internally so that we can make data-based decisions, which is why over the summer months we see some of those work orders being extended. They're open for long periods of time because we're investing a lot of hours into the same project, so that work order stays open for longer.
Wilson, can you give a few examples of what type of work orders we receive from the schools? I think is what.
Sure, anything. If it's broken faucet, broken toilet, there's a leak, there's a smoke, there's anything, really. We make ourselves available both through the work order system, through email and through phone, so that emergencies can be communicated to us. Emergencies like smoke, the fire alarm's going off and it wasn't me who set it off. The security panel won't stop beeping. The blinds are something. A kid put his fist through a window.
Would it be fair to say that the difference between a work order and, if you will, maintenance that is done through our contract is work orders are not, hey, the floor needs to be cleaned, I don't believe. It's a tile is missing, or there's damage to the wall, or there's a damage to a door, or that kind of thing? Would that be?
Generally, yes.
Generally speaking.
Generally.
Things that need that kind of repair work, or what have you, as opposed to standard cleaning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I'm happy to provide further clarification if any board members would like to talk about that. Moving on, looking at our work orders received over the same timeline, it's relatively consistent. We're typically ending up around 13 to 16,000 work orders per year. That's both work orders submitted to us by schools, work orders we have created ourselves to track time. Again, we can see a big drop around spring of fiscal year 20. Every year we have the ROE supplemented by the fire department and our own life safety staff inspect our schools for life safety violations to ensure that our schools are a safe learning environment. Over the past 3 fiscal years, we've consistently seen the numbers of life safety violations decrease. Some examples, I guess, are the top 5 life safety violations are electrical systems, interior wall, ceiling, and floor finishes, clearance above storage, furnishing and decorations, and exhaust fans. For the most part, those are self-explanatory. I'd help to give examples if you'd like. Electrical systems, in this context, every year or every time the ROE comes out to do these life safety inspections, they often have a specific item that they're looking for, that they're trying to find, that has become something that they care about more than maybe a few other things. Electrical systems in this case is compact fluorescent lights. The little spiral ones that screw in, they don't like those, they want them to go away. So this, on the last FY21 life safety inspection, that was their number 1 priority, get rid of those things. So we're working on that. Beyond that, ceiling tiles being wet or stained or missing, that's something that was a high priority for them. But as you can see, this distribution heavily favors the elementary schools only because we have more elementary schools than any other type of school. And these numbers are not atypical for a district of our size. This is pretty common. In 2019, as mandated by the Illinois, the ISB, we had a decennial life safety inspection. That is one that happens every 10 years. Out of that, different priority level items are given to us with timelines in which we are to complete them, those being A, B, and C. Priority A's have to be completed within a year, B's 5 years, and C is 10 years, but by the time you get to 10 years, you're at the next decennial life safety inspection. Our priority A's, we have approximately 30 of those remaining. Our priority B's, we have approximately 302. So we're about 94% complete with our priority A's, and we're about 29% complete with our priority B's. There is a bit of leeway that was given to us on the timeline for the priority A's because of COVID, because it happened, during the window when we would be working on those. But our deadline for those was somewhere between May and June of this year. Those remaining 32 will be completed before I talk to you next time for the next facilities master plan. Here is a grade level breakdown of the priority A's. You can see how many were identified at each grade level and their current completion. And then again, priority B's, which have a 5-year deadline. You can see there how many we identified and how many are completed. We have a number of decennial life safety priority B's that will be completed this summer, projects that include a lot of roof replacements. So those will be addressed in addition to the ESSER and ARP ESSER projects that we have coming up this summer. The final thing that I wanted to touch base with you on is preventative maintenance. Back in fiscal year 19, we had come before the board and said that we're going to make a concerted effort to improve our preventative maintenance stance. We want to get ahead of the maintenance instead of reacting when things go bad. So in an effort to do that, we increased to 17% of our total maintenance being preventative in fiscal year 20, and as of 21, we're at 25%. Obviously, we're looking towards 50% being the next large benchmark, being in the top 20% of our peer group, and ideally 66%. The one major component that we have remaining that will push us over 50% and looking towards 66% is HVAC. There's an incredible number of HVAC pieces of equipment within the district. And this project, getting this information, implementing preventive maintenance schedules is time consuming. A lot of that will come as we replace HVAC systems with the ESSER and ARP ESSER dollars, and as we install some of the new systems, air conditioning the entirety of our district. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Ms. Mohammed.
You had briefly touched on the summer projects that we're going to be starting here soon, and you mentioned that there's going to be a lot of roof replacement, which we've been getting information about that on the board level. And I know that there's been mention about HVAC projects too, but can you refresh my memory out of the schools that you mentioned? Are all of them going to be getting HVAC maintenance done, or are there just a few?
So the goal of the ESSER and the ARP ESSER dollars, what we're pursuing is air conditioning everywhere. The first step of that is going to be this summer, using some of those dollars to replace units that don't currently have air conditioning and install air conditioning units that do. Adjacent to that, as part of the decennial life safety priority B items that we're mandated to address, some roofs will be replaced. Obviously, for HVAC equipment that sits on the roof and roofs that need to be replaced, those two things need to happen in tandem, so we're not putting new equipment on an old roof.
Okay, so all the schools will be getting HVAC maintenance this summer, or no?
So, Ms. Mohammed, we have 10 schools that will be having HVAC replacement done in, and the 10 that Wilson listed earlier. Next summer, it'll be another 10, and the third summer, it'll be 11. So there will be a total of 31 schools that currently have different levels of HVAC. The schools that we chose this summer, the 10, were chosen because they had the lowest percentage of air conditioning across the full square footage.
And just to add one item, we have not been approved for the ARP USR yet. We're going back and forth, which is typical when we're doing these large grants. And this is not what we would typically get a grant for, obviously. So I just want to be sure this is our plan, this is what we submitted, but we haven't gotten final approval on it yet. We're still waiting.
And Ms. Mohammed, to answer, I think, your second question, we also have 10 roofs that we'll be trying to address in fiscal year 22 and 23. If you remember correctly, last spring, you approved the Fairview Early Childhood Center to be re-roofed. Unfortunately, because of material shortages and long lead time items, that was not able to be completed this summer, but will be pushed to next spring and will be completed by June 30th. The other schools that we're looking at that were approved by the board: Barber, East, Ellis, Haskell, Kennedy, Lewis Lemon, Lincoln, West, and Westview.
Thanks, everybody.
I would just like to add, from the decennial life safety standpoint, that leaves 7 major roofs that are left to be replaced, that being Auburn, Guilford, Johnson, Roosevelt, Rolling Green, Welsh, and Whitehead. Roosevelt obviously will, wait to see where that discussion leads potentially as we enter discussions on a new facilities master plan. But these are priority B items, which we have 5 years to complete, which should be complete in calendar year 2025.
Ms. McCulloch?
Could you just email the board a list of the 10,
I sure can.
And the 10 for this year, so that we know which ones, if people in the community.
No, this was on. These were in the budget.
HVAC is what I was talking about.
Yes.
Because you said you had 10 HVAC this year, 10 HVAC
Correct.
the next year, and 10 HVAC the next year. You were starting with the ones with the least amount of air conditioning. So I just think it would help as a board member if people at.
Yep, I will send out all 31 schools in the years they'll be addressed.
Mr. Rollins?
That came through my committee, so that those lists were actually provided to us previously. Not that I expect anybody to remember them, but on slide 3, I'm still having a little bit of trouble interpreting this. So it looks like, let's just take fiscal year 21 as an example, that for at least later in the year, about 80% of the work orders were being closed out within 30 days or less than 30 days.
Yep.
So how long did it take to close out the other 20%?
The other 20% would have been, well, they wouldn't have been closed within that time period. They would have gone beyond the 30 days.
Like how long though?
I can get that information for you.
If you wouldn't mind, and so this information, similar information, used to get reported to us as the average time to close of all work orders, which is just a different way of, saying, but it does include all work orders. So I wouldn't mind seeing what the average time to close all work orders has been either for over the same time period.
Sure.
And then, so it does look like this summer you got up to 100% within 30 days?
Yes. As of this report, obviously that's going to change as the year goes on.
And then long term, we're talking about the ARP ESSER and the HVAC, assuming we do get the funding, and I think we assume we're going to get it. And we do all of this HVAC work long term, that's going to increase our maintenance internally. Are we planning to add positions to do that?
So that's definitely something, Mr. Rollins, we're going to have to discuss, whether we look at adding positions or really identifying the scope of work we do well with our current staff and subcontracting some of this larger preventative maintenance that we aren't able to do maybe because of expertise or tools needed to complete preventative maintenance. Very similar to how we're addressing certain things at this point.
Okay, I just want to make sure we stay on top of it, because in connection with this discussion about the work orders, it's great that we're, air conditioning the buildings. It is going to be more maintenance. And we're going to have to stay on top of that, or we'll just have more open work orders.
And we'll have more electrical costs too, right?
That's correct.
Have to be fun.
Are there any other questions? One thing I'm curious about is, in your opinion, between the two of you, we've obviously, we're at the end really of our 10 years facility plan. I mean, do you see any impact on either work orders or, even like you look at the decennial life safety and those kinds of things, we spent, several $100 million plus. So I'd be interested in your opinion on how that affected any of these stats.
Mr. Connor, I think our last 10 years facilities master plan had a dramatic impact on utility costs. If you think about all the windows that were replaced, boilers that were upgraded at different locations. So we definitely had an impact on our utilities, as well as addressing a number of our exterior building envelope issues. Obviously, we didn't get 100% of those items addressed. But we had a tremendous impact in the last 10 years. And I would say also from an aesthetic standpoint, walking into these schools from 2012 until now, what a major change. And one that really comes to mind was one we did last year that would have been Kennedy Middle School, and the positive impact and feedback that I still get yet this year from the principal and teachers, not only just the interior upgrades we did, but the furniture also.
And how about when I look at, I think it's slide, they're not numbered, one of my most unfavorite things, is the annual life safety, and it's gone down, from 19 to 20 to 21. And so one of the obvious questions there is, again, are we doing better because of some of that, I assume? And is it also practice? I mean, what?
Definitely, I think the facilities master plan did have an impact on that, but we've made a concerted effort working in partnership with our schools to communicate some of the items that have been these top 5. And a lot of times it does become storage issues, location that we're storing things, daisy chains when it comes to electrical outlets. So it's definitely been a partnership between ourselves, the schools, and our design and construction team to continually communicate where our pinch points have been, and I think we've seen over the last 3 years that continue to decrease.
Okay, if there's nothing else, these will come up for a vote on the October 12th. And then there's also the preview of the consent items. And if I go down for the 12th, there's really, if you look at the list, it's a lot of the standards, but we do have some asbestos abatement. We have the American Institutes for Research. We have the architectural engineering. We've got a couple of those contracts. Title I plans. We have reoccurring contracts. Regional Office of Ed, the Internal Customer Service Survey, Contracted Teacher, Page Park Asbestos, Styles Asbestos, Purchase Orders, etc. Are there any items that people would like more info on. Awkwardly worded, but you get the idea. Yes, no, are we good on that? Then on the board for the 1026, I think, let's see. Those seem to be our standard items, you know, accounts payable, blah, blah, blah. So, no offense, I know. So that's a good news. Well, they're, you know, they're standard, right? Come on, that should be good news for the CFO, right? Are there any questions on any of those consent items? All righty, well, I think then that performance and monitoring is done.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. I'm going to cede the floor to Mr. Rollins for the Planning and Development Committee portion of the meeting.
First item on the agenda is the Educational Services Agreement with Rockford University. This relates to offering dual credit courses within our high schools, so that courses in our high schools that kids can take that will also get them college credit. And in order to do that, the high school teachers have to have meet certain requirements and have certain certifications. And so, and one of those is a certain amount of master's level coursework in their core content area. And so what the district has done is entered into a partnership with Rockford University. Rockford University is going to offer courses at 1/3 their usual student rate, as long as we provide them with these cohorts. And the first cohort, each cohort is supposed to be a minimum of 20 students. And the first cohort is going to be English language arts. And the cost is in the executive summary. So the cost per cohort is going to be $200,000. And then my assumption is, the way this is worded, we're looking at future cohorts with different content areas. If somebody can answer that question.
In brief, yes, we will be adding content areas on an annual basis. Our core content areas are English language arts, science, social science, and math. But I think I've filibustered long enough and you're remote.
That is correct. Our plan right now is English, then math, then biology, then history.
Okay.
And it is a minimum cost of $100,000. So that's $10,000 per adult student for a minimum of 10 students, a maximum of 20.
That's a little bit different than what's in the executive summary. This says minimum 400,000, not to exceed 800,000.
That's for the life of the contract.
Okay, so it's a minimum of $100,000 per year, not to exceed 200,000 per year over 4 years?
It's a minimum of 100,000 per cohort. So each cohort is 18 months long.
Okay. Anyway, so it's in the executive summary. It's going to be a minimum of 400,000, not to exceed 800,000. We are paying for this. This is, this is the district paying for these courses for the students. So are there any questions? Mr. Siegel?
Thank you. Are there other benefits to the teachers aside from they're going to get this additional amount of education?
Well, they're getting, with this, they can get a dual credit endorsement. So the Dual Credit Quality Act passed in 2016, which allows teachers to teach dual credit with 9 hours of master's cohort, a master's content area credits under their belt, working towards 18. And once you have 18 credit hours in a core content area and master's program, you get endorsed by ISB to teach dual credit in that content area, which is a benefit. Teachers could take that anywhere they would like, but we will have a promissory note in place that will require them to teach at RPS after they are done with the master's cohort.
For how long?
Mrs. McCullough?
2 years. Is that correct? Yes, 2 years.
After they complete it?
After they complete, correct.
And if they don't, then they have to pay us back how much?
The full amount.
Are there any other questions?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Will we be reviewing this at the end of the, to see how many people that we have coming forward? Because they're minimums and max, and because when the divider obviously makes it a much more expensive per
We have 18 people who have been vetted and approved by Talent Development and College and Career Readiness.
For which cohort?
The English composition.
Because that's the one you're starting with.
Correct.
18 out of 20 spaces?
Correct.
Okay, and those last 2 are still open?
They are, yes.
I mean, they'll be made available, I guess I'm saying?
Yes, we had 20 people apply, but 2 of them were only certified to teach elementary. And the purpose of this program is so that we can launch dual credit in our high schools. So there wouldn't necessarily be benefit to our students if we paid for those 2 people to go through the program.
So we opened it up again, though?
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. When does the first cohort start again? Start, is that next fall or?
Starts this fall.
Okay.
Yes.
But has not started yet?
It has already started, yes.
Oh, so we're going to be approving something that is already in place and happening?
Correct.
And why is the timeline like that? Why didn't this come to us before it started? I mean, if we say no, what do? Pull everybody? Do we have a choice?
Can I defer to you, Dr. Jarrett?
Yeah, you certainly have a choice, and I think what this came down to, I hate to put the board in this kind of a position, and we rarely do that. And I think it came down to the urgency that we've felt from the board about improving our academic outcomes. I think this is an immediate impact on student achievement in English as we take our best and brightest teachers and make this investment in them. And to wait an entire year felt antithetical to the urgency the board has displayed. I ultimately completely sympathize with the board's position of being put in kind of a fait accompli, difficult position, and we will certainly do everything we can to avoid that ever happening again.
Do we possibly have a breakdown of the demographics of the 18 participants in the first cohort?
Yes, I could. I'm happy to send that to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is the fiscal year 23 preliminary budget assumptions. First, the next item on our agenda tonight is a presentation and discussion of our preliminary budget assumptions for fiscal year 2023. This is the first step in the fiscal year 23 budget cycle. This discussion presents an opportunity for board members to be involved in the budget process by providing feedback on the revenue and expenditure assumptions before the cycle begins. I will now turn the meeting over to Mrs. Sather, Executive Director of Budget, for her presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Rollins. So yes, this is our, we'll take a first look at our fiscal year 23 budget assumptions. And in the later part of the presentation, kind of a first look at the budget as a whole. I'll walk through revenue assumptions first, followed by some expenditure assumptions. And then we'll look at our multi-year projections as well as our fund balance, available fund balances by fund within our education fund. So first, looking at our revenue assumptions, our 3 major revenue streams here are evidence-based funding, tax levy revenue, and CPPRT, or corporate personal property tax revenue. And I'll go through these individually here. So for evidence-based funding, we are assuming a 7% increase in our overall funding for FY23. We can see here that that's been our kind of our static increase year over year, except for the 2021 year where our funding was held flat. This takes a look at our funding in a little bit different level, where it breaks it out between our base minimum funding and our tier funding. So for 2022, our $166 million that we did receive in 22 becomes our new base for our 2023 budget year, and on top of that, we get our additional tier funding. So we are budgeting a 7% increase in evidence-based funding totaling $177 million for 2023. Our property tax levy assumptions, we're budgeting property tax levy flat except for including our new property values. And this year we wanted to just discuss a little bit how the fiscal year revenue between each levy year affects the fiscal year. So half of 2021's levy and half of 2022's levy will be recorded in FY 2023's budget assumptions. So here we have a look at our tax revenue, levy revenue by year. The last two rows here are our 2 years of assumptions. 2021 tax levy assumed an EAV of $2.5 billion, which is what we've received from the county's assessor's office. New property value at $6.4 million, and a tax rate of $6.23, totaling $156.5 million for our 2021 tax levy. Looking forward to our 2022 tax levy, which is a year out, we do have to make some assumptions on that as well. So we've assumed a 5.5% increase in EAV, $8 million in new property, and an assumed tax rate at this point of 5.92 cents per EAV value, with a tax levy revenue of $157.3 million. Again, 2022 is a way far out assumption, but for our 22 budget, we have to kind of take our levy year into the next year. Here's a look at our EAV that is incorporated in our tax levy assumptions for from 2015, actually starts in 2008, but 2015 through 2022, we can see our EAV has consistently increased about 33%. And we can see here that our assumed increases in EAV are those lower amounts there. So for 2021, we're assuming an increase of 5.8% in EAV, and 2022, a 5.5% in EAV. So how does this affect the tax rate? So currently, in our situation in the county here, our existing EAV is increasing, so our tax rate is dropping, which we can see in the next couple slides, with CPI staying consistent over all three of these. Another factor in our tax levy is our consumer price index. We've have a graph here that shows the calendar year CPI for 2021, where we can see in January the CPI was at 1.4. It peaked in June at 5.4, and our latest reporting month that we had available was August at 5.3. So if we incorporated CPI within our tax levy for our 2022 levy, we would be using a 5% CPI increase. We're assuming that our 5.3 will flatten out through the rest of this calendar year and use December's estimated at 5%. Here's a look at our EAV in relation to our tax levy dollars. So again, from 2015 to 2022, we can see the yellow bars are EAV, where our values are rising year over year, and our tax levy dollars are had stayed consistent through 2019, and then 2020, 2021, and 2022 increasing a bit due to that new property value included in the calculation. Here's a look at our property tax rate trend, highest in 2015 at 7.94, and continuously dropping as EAV increases, as well as holding the levy, the line on the tax levy. So for 2021, our estimated property tax rate at 6.23, and our 2022 estimate at this point, 5.91. Moving on to CPPRT, our corporate personal property tax replacement revenue, we're assuming an 8% increase, and here is our CPPRT chart year over year, where we can see our revenue has, it's for the last several years, have consistently risen. 2021 to 2022, we did see a large increase in this revenue at 14%. So for 23, we're kind of taking it back down to a more normal year of like 2019, 2020, where we saw 8 to 9% increase. So we're using an 8% to be conservative at this point. We are dedicating 10 million of this revenue to our capital fund for facilities needs. We did start that in fiscal year 22, as you may recall. So we are providing a dedicated funding stream to our capital fund to facilitate all the capital facility needs that are being made. So on the expenditure side, for salaries, we've incorporated our negotiated increases per the union contracts, and all other salaries at this point, we're assuming a 3% increase. We do have 2 contracts coming up for negotiations. And supplies and purchase services, based on our estimated inflation rate, we're using a 3% increase for those costs for our 2023 year. Employee benefits, we've kept all flat at this point. We do have an increase in health and RX claims at 6%, based on what the economists are saying will be trending for health increases, and our last look at our actual health expenses from 20 to 21, where we saw an increase in those costs. So here's a look at CPI from calendar years 2016 to 2020, which are actual. And then 2021, 22, and 23, we're estimating those at this point. We're using our 21 and 22's estimates to get a blended rate for our assumed inflation rate for 2023's year at 3%. This is a look at our health and RX claims history for the past, since 2017 to 2020, we can see that our health and prescription claims have stayed consistently flat around 45 million. We did see a spike in 2021's actuals up to 50 million. And so 2022's budget was already set at 45 million. We are anticipating or budgeting an increase in healthcare claims for 2023 at a 6% rate to make that overall $47 million. So that wraps up our assumptions. Here's how it kind of looks as a multi-year projection. We do have our fiscal year 22 budget, which we're currently in. That's our first column there, followed by our projected 2023 budget, 24, 25, and so on. So if we look at our 23 budget at this point with these assumptions built in, we're at a deficit of a little over $1 million. Assumptions will change and could change before this budget is final, but this is kind of the first look at what our budget looks like as a whole for 2023. And then looking at our fund balances, we do have sufficient fund balances to cover our operating needs. We have that 25% board policy, which is around 120 million. And we could see here that our fund balances for our operating funds are way at a 40% level at this point. That's all I have on that. Any questions? Happy to take them.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Myself off. Slide 19 with the claims history and projection for 2021. What's the explanation? Do we have an idea why we were so off?
COVID.
Yeah, I thought of that.
Yeah, it really is. People were catching up from things that hadn't been done before. So that's where we saw the spike, was just people were going to the doctor more. So that's really the explanation for that year. I think it's an outlier. I don't think it'll continue on. We had plenty of fund balance in that fund, in our health insurance fund. There's plenty of money there to do it. We dipped into that fund balance this for 21. We're just closing that up now. So that we dipped into fund balance, but we had plenty there to manage that. So that's why we didn't go crazy with, really spiking it up to 50 million. We don't think it's going to stay there. It's been consistent at the 45 million. We've done a really great job managing that through education. I'm giving Mr. Zedeker some credit over there. So I think overall we've done a really great job. So we don't really think it's going to go up much, but we don't want to dip into fund balance again. So,
But you're pretty sure this year's off too?
We don't know that yet.
Oh, I thought you.
No,
I
no.
thought I heard you say.
Well,
that.
the budget is 45 million. I still think that that's a good, that's a good number. Yeah, but I think we just had an outlier year.
Yep. Thank you.
Somebody, Ms. Pearson?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I have an overall budget question just for clarity and in regarding to, and I'm sure it goes under the educational piece. Can you explain to me how the MCL, and maybe Matt Zedeker can help me understand how that is funded, and give me some additional information on that, please and thank you.
Yeah, so our MCL position is excuse me, funded out of Title II. So it's a grant fund. The reason that we're able to fund it out of Title II is that they're responsible for professional development within their building, which falls underneath the guidelines of that Title II grant.
Excuse me. So what is the current status on the MCL in terms of the budget and how they're compensated?
The status is the same as last year. We budgeted for up to 18 MCLs in Title II. They are a stipend that is paid off a percentage of the Step 2 now with the updated contract. So their stipend is a percentage of the bachelor Step 2 in the salary schedule. Just under 9. I think it's somewhere about $8,400, $8,500, somewhere in there.
So is the Step 2 the only criteria? So what is I'm trying to get an understanding of the criteria for their compensation.
Yeah, so it's a negotiated percentage like other differentials with the REA. And so we negotiate what that percentage of that step in the salary schedule. It used to be Step 1. So whether you're a high school football coach, an MCL, a CIL, so a lot of our differentials are based off of a percentage of that step in the salary schedule. So that will change depending on the contract where they're at. So that's how we calculate what the payment is for that.
So if there's what could interfere with the contract?
I'm not sure I'm clear on the question.
Okay, so what is the latest status on the MCL's compensation?
That it hasn't changed.
So there's been no changes in their compensation with any changes, say for an example, at Lewis Lemon?
Oh, in terms of if they don't have an aspiring teacher, then they don't have the MCL stipend, if that's what you're getting at. Yeah, so that's paired with an aspiring teacher. So if we didn't have the number of aspiring teachers that we needed to fulfill those vacancies to pair with our MCL, then they're not awarded an MCL differential for that year.
So the aspiring teacher is the only criteria in which they are allotted the stipend?
Correct. It's a mutual, it goes together.
And so what other expectations do the MCLs have outside of the aspiring teacher?
So then we would ask them on top of the year-long student teacher that they work with their grade level for PLCs. They would meet with their principal and develop opportunities to go observe in other classrooms. So what the aspiring teacher allows for that MCL to do is to do the other kind of work, which is to get into their peers' classroom for intervention, co-teaching, observation with feedback. All of those opportunities are created because we have a year-long student teacher to allow them to take on those other duties and other roles.
Okay, so if the aspiring teacher is one component that is missing, they lose everything.
Correct. We don't award that differential because the program isn't intact.
Okay, so
I think we're missing something in the explanation. So the way the program works is if there are 3 third-grade classrooms, the aspiring teacher creates a 4th teacher for 3 classrooms. And so what ends up happening is now that's why you can't perform the function without that extra person to cover the classroom, which allows that teacher to be in all 3 classrooms. So that's why this is so monumental in terms of accomplishing all of the duties and tasks, is we have to pair it with an aspiring teacher, because without that aspiring teacher, you have to be with your students the whole day. You see the difference? So there's four teachers for 3 classrooms. You take that 4th teacher out, now there's 3 teachers for 3 classrooms, so the job can't be performed under that, because that's the essential element of the job, is you can't be in all the classrooms, you have to be in your own.
Okay. My next question is, just for future references, you mentioned Title II, so are you referring to funding associated with Title II?
Yeah, Title II is a federal grant that we received that has requirements
Correct.
on how we can spend it.
Okay, so is this also an area where Title I funding can be used?
That would be a potential. I'd have to refer to Dr. Wolf on that, but it could be something that we looked at the guidelines where Title I potentially could be utilized to use as a funding source for this differential.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Connor?
Yeah, on slide 17, on the expenditure assumptions, so this and the CPI are kind of related in my mind, which is, I think the one right before. Anyway, so 12, and this, it says that the supplies and purchase services are 3% increase for estimated inflation. There have been some high numbers on the inflation front that they've talked about. And so I want to understand the 3% number on this, because I'm wondering if that actually might not come in higher. And I'm thinking like materials, there have been some recent increases in that. And I don't know if any of that's included in this, the supply side. Plus, there's been a lot of articles about interruption to supply chains and, in addition, that will add to that inflation. So,
yeah. So this chart here is what you might want to be looking at.
Oh yeah,
as
that
well.
was the one. Which one is that?
That's slide 18.
Slide 18. Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. Okay.
So this does kind of look at 2021's, the inflation that we're anticipating for the year on an average of 4%, essentially.
Right.
And then taking that out another year at a 3. So, we are just assuming like 3. We initially had it at a 5, but as we're just kind of looking at the trend in inflation from the beginning of the calendar year to the end and assuming an average 4% for our 2021 year.
Yeah.
I mean, it could change. We could, have some more information and have to bump that up.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the things. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about, and, I think the markets have been saying that essentially there's a concern about inflation going longer than what they had said. Yeah. And to my mind, there is core inflation in there already, but again, the supply chain and the rest of it, and now building materials are going back up. Wood, for example, has been going up. Oil has been going up, which is the manufacturing basis of a lot of that inflation. That's why I'm curious on that.
Yeah, so after the last Fed meeting, the economists pivoted again and looked at, we don't think it's going to last as long as originally thought. There are different kinds of materials, as you pointed out, that are way high, and there's others that are low. They're not as high. So the blended is coming in. Economists think right now that we're going to be seeing this 3.5% going out. So, I mean, we usually have vacancies. I mean, we usually are pretty conservative with what we are budgeting, but to give a good look at what we think now, and we can update, as Mrs. Sather said, later on in the budget season. But right now, I think that's probably anyone's best guess is the 3%. And that's really what the economists came out right after the Fed's last meeting.
Yeah. No, I read some of that. It just stood out to me that 3% for the supplies and the
Well, and you don't want to be
services.
too high, because if we do, I mean, if you do 5% and then it comes in at 3, I mean, we've had all this
Sure.
cushion, and we might not be investing the dollars that we
Wisely.
should be,
Yeah,
so.
I get it, but-
I think this is
Yeah.
a good, I mean, this is, you know, we can take, you know, recommendations, obviously, from the board, we would.
Yeah.
But that's the caution, is
Sure.
really, if we say, okay, we can't do some things because we have banked on this, you know, inflation being
Yeah.
higher.
And I assume that there will be a revenue impact, that now treasuries are at what, 1.5%, and so that, you know, we should be able to see some of that, and I assume some of that's in the plans for the cash flow.
Yeah,
I don't
the
know,
interest
yeah.
income, yeah, so we.
You're right, because, I mean, we'll have
well.
bonds that are due, and, you know, and then we have our normal restructuring that we do, so.
Yeah, so, you know, our interest income, even though this has been, you know, a near zero rate, we still have done very, very well.
Oh, yeah, no, we've done well, but my point is, it looks like the structural rates, because, you know, are now going up. Wasn't it the 10-year was 1.5 something, so that's actually up quite a bit, even in the last, 2 months, so.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'd like to just have a conversation about whether we want to take new property again. So the board held the tax levy even for years. In the past couple of years, we did allow the administration to take new property. I mean, people do complain about our tax rates, and I haven't seen the numbers for a couple of years, but while I was watching them anyway, we had the third highest tax rate in the area. Harlem has a higher tax rate than us, but they don't have any village real estate taxes, so they get away with it. And for some reason, I think it was Pecatonica that had a really high tax rate. But everybody else in the area is lower than us. And, you know, the sooner we can drop our tax rate down to be competitive with surrounding areas, the more competitive Rockford's going to be in terms of attracting and retaining people. And the reason why we're getting so much money from the state is this evidence-based funding formula is really geared to try to get more money to poorer communities so they don't have to tax themselves so much. So we have had tremendous revenue increases from the state, and I'd like to see us give more relief to our local taxpayers. So I'm just going to suggest that we not take new property next year.
Do you know how much we can project that we won't be taking with that?
It's in the slides. It's about, I thought it was like 700,000.
Yeah, we go back to the slide 9 here. So 644,000 is the increase in the levy. Some of that is our debt levy, though. So the new property amount, if we do take new property or tax, it would be about 365,000, because we do have our debt schedule where our payments are going up year over year for our levy.
And the levy discussion's coming forward to our next committee of the whole in November. So this is kind of a preview, because we're banking, you know, we're doing the assumptions at the same time, but that's when we're going to go through the levy presentation as well.
Mr. Connor?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Rollins on this one, and I felt I talked enough, but I was going to make that same point, that from the taxing standpoint, and if you look, tax rate is still going to go down even with that, but I think the point is that we want to affect that tax rate, because from my standpoint, I will just say on a personal level, when I talk to people out in our sub-district, this is always something that's looked on very favorably, is that downward trend, and to accelerate that is always a good thing. So I agree with Mr. Rollins.
Mrs. McCulloch?
How much more will we drop our tax rate if we do that? Do we have that number?
I believe it's 2 cents.
It is 2 cents, yeah.
And would administration want to give us their reasoning behind taking? I mean, we did for the first time last year.
We made a commitment to spend it on investing in deferred maintenance, and the delta is small enough on this that I think the 2 cents the cumulative build of the 2 cents is a reasonable compromise, and it allows a specific investment. While I don't think it's going to make or break us this year, and I'll certainly support, I always am a big fan of the lowest possible tax rate, so I'm not advocating really hard one way or the other. But I do think at some point it's prudent to start raising the base a little bit because I think we're going to hit a cliff in 2024 when federal funding stops. I think evidence-based funding is going to be in jeopardy, and the lower that number is, the less local revenue we'll have to kind of balance out that challenge. Now, our reserves are in place for that reason, to hopefully soften that fall. But we would be very specific with what we'd be investing this $300 and some thousand. It would go right into facilities to address deferred maintenance, and it's a 2 cent delta. So I think it's a reasonable debate. I can see both sides on this one.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes, I'm in agreement with Mr. Rollins on this. I think we have enough things against us that make us less attractive. And if this will contribute to us being more competitive, I am definitely in support of lowering the taxes.
We will bring that, like Michelle mentioned, next month at the committee meeting, we'll bring the levy discussion forward.
Okay, so we actually don't have to make a decision today, is what they're saying, is we can have a more specific discussion in November when they do the levy discussion, and everybody just be thinking about it.
Yeah, and we'll have different scenarios, so we'll have all those rates if we do or don't or whatnot, so we have that kind of built into the presentation to show you that.
We also will have the comparative rates looking a year back, and hopefully we'll have this year's data. I think the most recent we have is the 2020 data right now for how we compare to other school districts.
Yes.
We've really closed the gap pretty significantly with the work we've done over the last 9 years. And I think my suspicion is when we see that new data, we will have made even more progress.
Is it possible to be looking at what other governmental entities are doing?
The city held their levy flat. That's the only other taxing body. That's the only taxing body that made a commitment.
Okay. Thank you.
That is the other thing that I was going to say, is it's a better story to say you held your levy flat as opposed to saying, well, we held the levy flat, but. All right, are there any other questions on that? Otherwise, we have, under preview of consent items, one item on the October 12th, 2021 board meeting, RFP 2211, rebid strategic planning solicited proposals for a strategic partner to assist with aligning our strategic planning goals to our system-wide framework. You recall that, and we talked about this previously, and they'd gone out for an RFP to have somebody assist us with our next strategic plan. Our old strategic plan is actually out of date now, and we need to be doing some strategic plan process. This would just be the people to facilitate that and help that. I think they got, if I remember right, 2 proposals in response to that RFP. After looking at those proposals, the administration thought that really maybe they hadn't defined the work clearly enough or carefully enough, and that they might be better off redefining it and going back out for bids again. That's what they've done. And I assume this means that you're going to be ready to make a selection at the next board meeting. Is that why it's on here?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So that will be on the consent agenda for the October 12th, 2021 board meeting. Are there any questions about that? Seeing none, there are no consent items for the October 26th, 2021 board meeting. This completes the report of the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Governance Committee has no items other than the consent items, which are the same for October 12th and the 26th meeting minutes, contract purchase orders, possible workers' compensation settlement, and the Freedom of Information log. And then, how's that? Mine took less than 30 seconds. All right. We do not have any speakers tonight. So we're on to the portion where I ask if you have any further comments. Any of the board members have further comments or agenda recommendations? Seeing none, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 7:50 p.m. Thank you.